yesterday, a special tribunal in Bangladesh has sentenced the former Prime Minister of the country, Sheikh Hasina, and its former Home Minister to death for their role in the violence against protesters last year and for their crimes against humanity in this matter. Hello, you're watching Seema Says, a show where The Wire's editor, Seema Chishti, talks to us about the big news of the week. And this is what she's going to talk about first.
Oh, okay, right. It's very difficult days for Bangladesh, Jahnavi, as we know. The former Prime Minister, deposed last year in a popular coup, is now has faced charges all of the time after they set up the tribunal by an interim government. And now they found her guilty and sentenced her to death, along with the Home Minister. But the IG police seems to have escaped the death penalty and is in prison for 5 years. I would like to quote the United Nations on this, and that kind of echoes my sentiment that I welcome the accountability, but a death penalty fills me with dread. I must disclose, if it's not evident already, that I'm opposed to the death penalty as a form of punishment. But short of that, to hold a trial like this in absentia will obviously cause concern, and a lot of people, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, have all said what they think about it. But I think there are other implications of this for us in India. One is, of course, from a straight IR perspective, what is going to be India's position? We have an extradition treaty with Bangladesh, and we see that the response by India on hearing about the judgment has been quite circumspect and also not very defensive of Sheikh Hasina either, which makes you wonder if in the business of engagement or re-engagement, recalibration, calibrating its ties with Bangladesh, India may have softened its position. This is very clear with the fact that the NSA of Bangladesh, Khalilur Rahman, will travel to India at the invitation of the Indian NSA Ajit Doval next week for the Colombo conclave. And there have been other conversations happening in Bangladesh. We're also playing a football match and all that. And for reasons of security, for reasons of economics, for reasons of water, and for not allowing Bangladesh to fully kind of embrace either Pakistan or China, the Indian establishment seems to be taking a kind of a view. So they have said things like, in the interests of peace, stability, and the people of Bangladesh, we will respond appropriately. But it's still not clear what they will do. There's an extradition treaty with Bangladesh signed in 2013, which has sufficient clauses for India to make a case that the whole thing is bad politics or is malintent, and we don't need to kind of surrender her if we want to. Court proceedings in India would have to happen for anyway it come to extradition. But even without that, we have an extradition act in India, which dates from 1962. And that clearly says that India can always say that there are political reasons why this is not proper or correct, and we should not hand over Hasina to Bangladesh. There have been many cases where India has wanted extraditions, like Kim Devi. That has not happened to India. David Headley by the United States, who's kind of wanted and is known to have played a very dubious role in the bombings in the attacks in 2006 in Bombay, and he also remains elusive to India. So that's there. The other side, of course, is watching other events in Bangladesh. Though Sheikh Hasina's authoritarianism had cast a cloud, and even if the Indian establishment could not see it or did not want to acknowledge it, there was deep unrest about her positions. We know about various documentaries and reports about the Aina Ghar and the number of hundreds of missing people there, young people there. So there's a lot of angst about that. But it should worry India also about what replaces authoritarian regimes in the neighborhood. So if we have something, and I don't buy all the stories about the anti-Hindu attacks, a lot of them are made up, but to the extent that we see the Jamaat making significant gains in the student elections. We see organized majoritarian forces which invariably, get the advantage of, stuff like this, political turmoil, as we saw even in Egypt with the Muslim Brotherhood, as we see in Bangladesh, and that should serve as a warning. Majoritarianism in South Asia seems to be like a default option of states, something that India escaped in 1950. But we should look with concern with this happening, and I'll just conclude this portion by large protests in Bangladesh to make sure that Ahmadiyas are formally de-recognized as Muslims. Now, this whole business about who's a Muslim, how do you eat, how do you pray, who do you pray to, becoming a concern of the state and all energies being directed there, this doesn't portend very well for Bangladesh. And I hope that they can kind of resolve this, and the new elections will actually bring a new dawn and more equity, harmony and peace.
Thanks for that, Seema. Next, I think we should talk about the Bihar elections. The results were announced on Friday, and we saw how the NDA has won a quite sweeping victory. And of course, the JDU has performed very well, but the BJP has emerged as the single largest party. So, what are your big takeaways from what we've seen in Bihar?
We've blabbered on non-stop about Bihar, so I think all our viewers will be quite fed up with what's happening in Bihar, but it's obviously a story that can't be ignored. Do watch our shows. We had a Hindi 3-hour show and we had a 1.5-hour English show on the day the results came out. But after that, what I can clearly say is there are two aspects to this. One is that there has been some data which the CSDS, not as CSDS, but Mr. Sanjay Kumar has put out in a BBC Hindi news story where he speaks of a post-poll survey trying to find out what happened. Why was this huge sweep which no one really could see? What made this sweep? And there are two broad conclusions they come to with their post-poll survey. One is that the extent of forward support for the NDA really was intensified in 2025, and also its ability to kind of get together the non-Yadav OBCs and the EBCs. Chirag Paswan with this Paswan and a signal to the larger Dalit population helped the NDA collect its votes, and its vote share has risen. It's a statistical fact. It's risen by about 9%. The vote difference between the Mahagathbandhan and the NDA was 0.03% in 2020. That is now a yawning almost 10% gap, because while the MGB, the Mahagathbandhan, has kept its kind of vote share, it has slipped by about 0.7%. But the gap is terrific and is huge. And it seems as if a lot of the other floating voters, non-committals, have gone and voted for NDA, and there's been a huge turnout. Of course, other than community consolidation happening behind the NDA and it kind of working this through, what has happened is that the welfare schemes, whether it is pension, whether it is free power, whether it is the women, the 10,000 as it's being called, the rupees 10,000, that has also served to kind of bring everything together. But I think we should not forget one thing, that we accept whatever numbers we have and we analyze that as honestly and judiciously as possible. But the role of the Election Commission, particularly in two things, in allowing this women's money scheme to go through, when an actual debit also actually clicked into women's accounts, bringing the entire tally of women benefiting from this during the Model Code of Conduct. And we know how the Election Commission, often the same Election Commission, but earlier Election Commissions have acted on schemes like this, how they responded to governments in Telangana and Karnataka from offering these things and force them to take it back, or in Orissa. And now this spectacular kind of disdain or this allowance being given to the ruling party in Bihar, which is the same as the one in the center, actually fills one with dread about what the Election Commission is doing. And the second thing is about duplicate voters. The Election Commission told reporters of the Reporters Collective that they had not applied the deduplication software on the voter list, which is quite an easy thing to do. So it's unclear why they did it when they had a special intensive revision on, much touted, needs to be done, put into practice and so close to polling day, why they didn't do that. And when somebody like Alt News, from just Twitter admissions of people, have found at least 4 to 5 BJP workers and leaders having voted in other states and having voted in Bihar, it makes you wonder if this is happening at scale, at industrial scale. We can't just keep waiting for press conference to tell us what's gone wrong. So I think the Election Commission's kind of role, should be under scrutiny, and for the sake of the ruling party and the sake of Indian democracy, it really needs to get its act together and actually come clean on so many questions, not only around SIR, but on several other things which could have impacted on voters' lists, and more than even the result, in just the credibility of elections and who's been elected to power.
Okay, coming to our last topic for today. We've been seeing a lot of unhappiness in the Indian footballing community. Players are coming out and saying that we just want to play football. The Indian Super League, which was founded, has kind of been on an indefinite hold. So what's happening in the world of Indian football? Yeah, the most terrifying thing that I read in a column on Sunday is that Mohan Bagan, this kind of premier name that even people who don't watch football in India would know, has, for the first time since 1889, it is to have no footballing activity this year. So essentially, football in India has been under pretty much of a cloud in the way it has behaved. From 2013, the AIFS, the Indian Football Federation, had
done a deal, a commercial deal with a Reliance company, with an Ambani company, which said that, we'll make football rock, etc. That contract runs out in 2015. But in the way things have gone, now we are faced with a situation where there's been no league kind of game that has happened in the past 215 days. And footballers, as you said, Sunil Chetri amongst others, are building a petition where they want to take it to the Supreme Court. And we must remember that the Football Federation has had a lot of trouble with appointing coaches. There have been a lot of resignations. They finally have Khalid, who's now come in and trying to lend some semblance of order there. There's been problems with infrastructure, with support, with money that you provide players. And it's a real tragedy because football may not be like cricket, but it's the first of a non-sahab sport, which is just so everywhere in the world, and where it's popular, like Goa, Kerala, Bengal, it's a religion, and people turn up and all you need is a ball. And of course, we have instances of several Latin American countries where football has been used to kind of lift spirits, to keep the young engaged, also as providing economic impetus to make people more productive, happier persons. So it seems like a huge missed opportunity. The Football Federation had trouble with how it kind of organized elections. So FIFA had also banned it. And all of that has happened as well. So I think sports governance in India, this just signals to why when India is talking about hosting the Commonwealth Games, it speaks about having an Olympic, Ahmedabad is going to be an Olympic city if the Indian government was to have its way and its bids move successfully. Then all the important pieces that make up sport, its governance, the fact that it serves a purpose larger than just medals or, gold, and it actually helps this young demographic with India, is all that needs to be kept into account. And the way football has gone this year doesn't fill me with confidence.
Thanks. That brings us to the end of our news analysis segment. But what are the recommendations you have for us this week, Seema?
The recommendations I have. There's a very interesting book review, which is in the China Books Review, of Vikram Seth's Heaven Lake. And that's like a great way, and really like a lot of respect for Vikram Seth and how the book has aged. And the review cites how he absolutely on a shoestring budget and often at huge risks as an Indian in China via Tibet enters and kind of roams the country. So I'd recommend that we definitely read the review, if not the book. We'll have it in the show notes. And the second thing is, on a lighter note, there's this sort of very interesting, slow burn, terrible, cliched phrase, but it does work for it, called Bodkin, which is on Netflix. And oddly enough, the Obamas are connected with this. This is some sort of a company which the Obamas had set up. I didn't know about this when I was watching it, but it's a great play with a journalist, a podcaster, and a researcher in Ireland, and a lot of like journalistic ethics about podcasters turning up and wanting true crime stories, and how they disrupt life in an Irish kind of a settlement, which is actually not very peaceful, but some sort of status quo is on. And they hate them for leeching their miseries to make their millions. But it works at various levels. And it's really good. Bodkin on Netflix.
Okay.
Your recommendation?
Yes, my recommendation is actually a brownie recipe, which is extremely easy. You can take less than 10 minutes. And apparently was developed by the American actress Katharine Hepburn. And her secret was that you should use more cocoa and less flour. So I will also put that in the show notes. And if you don't like baking, this is the recipe.
Have you tried it?
I have.
Great.
It's very fudgy. Okay, thank you, Seema, for all of that. And thank you all for watching. As always, if you have questions you want Seema to answer, please put them in the comments and she'll take them up in a future episode.